Sorry, I'm super dehydrated, so I'm trying to like chug that coconut water.
Start the countdown. Welcome to the Nurture Oklahoma live stream series. I hope that with this series we can help people in the central Oklahoma, well, all over Oklahoma really, community get to learn about the birth professionals and wellness professionals in our community and what they do. That way, maybe less people ask, what is the difference between a doula and a midwife? But here today, I have midwife Deanna Norris, who has a Bachelor's of Science in Midwifery. They are a certified professional midwife and a licensed midwife. So, Deanna, would you like to introduce yourself?
I mean, you did a pretty good job, but yeah, I'm Deanna. I live in Edmond, and yeah, I'm a midwife. So, but yeah, like I attend births in like the Oklahoma City metro area and kind of the north central Oklahoma area. So like Stillwater, Enid, Ponca City, kind of those like more northern cities. Yeah, this is my
Yeah.
little office.
Yeah, it's super cute. I love the whole aesthetic. It's cute. And we both have like leaves going on, which is cute.
I know. I know, they're everywhere. I was like bringing my really pretty plants into view.
Yeah. I have my black velvet alocasia back there, but
Mhm.
um
Mine died, but it's growing back this year. Threw it on the porch. I was about to just throw the whole darn thing out, and
yeah.
like it's totally got 2 new leaves, and I'm like, ugh.
Isn't it funny
About the
how that
time I just
happens? You have a majesty
about the
palm like
time
that too,
I
right?
say that
Do
again.
you have a palm like that too? I thought I have a
Mhm.
majesty palm where I just like threw it outside and I was like, oh well,
Yep.
spider mites. So good luck, dude. And I put it outside and
Yep.
it was like, woo, sunlight. And I'm like, where am I
I
gonna
know.
put you? You're so big.
I know. I literally have like 3 or 4 on my porch right now like that, and I have these lily that I was just done with. I was rehabbing it for like 8 months, and then finally I looked
Yeah.
at it in the shower one day because it's on a little shelf in my shower, and I was like, "I'm done with you. Like, you're going to the trash." And it now is flowering. I have done nothing different. It's just I
Yeah.
had to threaten it a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes they just survive on, the plants neglect. It's just it's
It
so
is, yeah,
interesting.
for sure, for sure.
I know that gardening is a really huge part of your life and houseplants, but can you tell us something interesting about yourself that people might not know?
I had a hard time with this question because I feel like I'm sort of like simultaneously like really private and also like really open. Like I'll talk to just about anybody about anything if it feels really comfortable. So I really wasn't sure kind of what to touch on because I feel like
Yeah.
people know who I am.
Yeah.
Like not in like an egotistical way, but like I'm pretty transparent about who I am. But I was thinking, older people might not know about sort of my artistic background because I went to OSU for apparel design. I wanted to be like a fashion designer at one point in my life. And then from there, I went to cosmetology school and then I did hair for a long time. And so like after kind of in throughout all of that, I also was like doing local art and selling that at little art shows and stuff like that. So that's kind of about the only thing I could kind of come up with.
No, that's pretty cool though. I didn't know you had like such an artsy background and such like,
Mhm.
style, and that's pretty cool. Do you feel like that crosses over into your, practice now in some way? I mean, other than the really cute aesthetic of your office?
Yeah. So I'm not great with decorating, but I love art and birth art. So yeah, like on my walls, like that's definitely part of it. I definitely do not dress like a fashion designer. If it's black and stretchy, I'm probably gonna wear it. 'Cause I'm all about being comfortable. I've had 3 children. I'm
Yeah.
old. I'm just like, I don't care if it's in style. I just want to be comfortable.
Well, at this point, I feel like the same thing where you're like, I don't even care. It's just comfy. All the things that I still
Mhm.
have are now like the 90s things from when I was younger. Those things are coming back, like the little choker things and like
Mhm.
the high waisted pants,
Yep.
not a thing for me. But I'm like, oh, actually, I was like, I'm not wearing mom pants. I'm not wearing those mom
Yeah.
pants. And then I wore the mom pants and I haven't gone back. They're just
Yeah.
chef's
Yeah. They
kiss.
can be comfy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But a good legging or for births, you said like to be comfy. So that reminds me of births. I just want to quickly ask, what is like your go-to comfy, birth outfit?
I do actually wear scrubs at births because I always get covered in stuff. I'm like not a neat midwife. I know there are some midwives that can go to a birth and leave looking impeccable. I'm rolling around in the muck, and so I
Yeah.
I wear scrubs so that I can like take them off like in the driveway or in my car or on my front porch and like leave them to be washed. So,
Yeah.
but they're usually just like solid black or solid gray. Like I'm not getting fancy with it. There's
Yeah.
very little color in my life.
Hey, black is all the colors combined, right? That's you're really
Exactly.
taking them all with you. So
Exactly.
what is your favorite thing to do outside of midwifery?
Um, I I have sort of a handful of hobbies that I sort of like fluctuate through. So at any given point, like this winter, like I got on a knitting kick again, but I
Mhm.
hadn't knit in like probably 8 years. But I still had all my stuff, and so I went through and I made a bunch of stuff. But like I haven't picked them up since. And but probably the most consistent thing I do is I work with herbs a lot, and I do a lot of cooking. And so those are probably my two most consistent things that I
Yeah.
do outside of midwifery, just it's sort of my meditation time.
Yeah, yeah. I think cooking is definitely like a movement meditation, a form of movement meditation. What's one of
Hmm.
your like favorite things to cook? Like what feels the most like you want to say comforting? I know there's some meals that I make and it feels almost comforting, like my own little
Hmm.
go-to. Do you have a recipe like that?
I mean, I have so many. It depends on what's going on,
Mhm.
like if it's late and I'm coming home and I'm famished and I'm just like, I don't want fast food. I don't want takeout. I want something just really quick and simple. I have sort of what we just lovingly call lemon spaghetti. It's literally like lemon and olive oil sauce on like some sort of pasta,
Yeah.
and whatever I have sort of in the pantry, I'll throw in it. And so it can be nothing, like I'll maybe just put some like Parmesan cheese and some basil in there, or I can do like chickpeas or saute
Ooh,
some
chickpeas.
vegetables, or like you can make it whatever you want, but that's sort of my staple for moments like that. But if I'm like trying to kind of work something out, or I really need like some like an emotional release or something, I'm going to do something a little bit more complicated, like maybe a focaccia bread, or like something
Ooh.
that's going to take me all day, right?
Yeah, I would say
um
baking, probably baking. If you're doing
yeah.
emotional release, it's probably with some kind of gluten. It's probably what's
Yeah, oh absolutely, the gluten helps those emotions come out every time.
happening. 100%. And it's funny too that you mentioned like that sounds very similar. In our house, we do rice bowls. It's my husband's
Hmm.
Japanese, and we're switching over to brown rice. Maybe that's a thing. I don't know. But yeah, we'll do like chickpeas or roasted veggies or like all kinds of different things. Everything can just go on rice, and we have like a rice cooker
Yeah.
so it's just like, and it's
Yeah,
easy. Gyoza.
so good.
But now I need to do this lemon spaghetti. This sounds so
It is so easy and so
yeah.
good, and once you eat it, you're like, where's this been all my life? Like literally, it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
simple and so good.
And simple too, and I'm sure my kids probably like it, which is a huge thing.
My kids always devour it. They always devour it.
Isn't it funny how you'll make something like really complicated and like really put your love into something that you cook, and then you're like, this
Mhm.
is my meal, and my like, look how
Yeah.
beautiful this is. Like Gordon Ramsay would come over and take a bite of this and be like,
Good
good job, chef.
job. Good job,
And your
chef.
kids
Good
are
job,
like,
chef.
no, I
They're like,
wanted
what is
box
this?
mac and cheese.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, that
Yep.
parent life. Um, so this is a really important question I love to ask any kind of professional, wellness, birth, circus, all those things. But how have you fought and survived against burnout? I know this is definitely an industry where a lot of us are trying to keep out of that cycle. How have
Yeah.
you? What's your story, or how do you do that?
Whew. So I cannot even say that I have done this successfully.
Hmm.
I will say it started when I was a student, but I also had two very small children at the time. I was nursing and attending births with like multiple midwives as a student midwife, and then I was going to my own births as a doula, and I still had a day job, and so there was a lot going on. And I will say probably like my last year of really doing like clinicals, I just broke, and I mean like bad. So I actually took a summer off of school and did some therapy, and like sort of re honed like what it was I was
Yeah.
trying to do, and just like had to let it be okay that my goal was not realistic. And I had to I had to rethink things and put my family first, and myself first, and now I feel like I'm a Capricorn, so I don't like spending money on like frivolous things, you know. If it comes from the thrift store, I'm like, woohoo, I got a deal. But I have committed to I have a massage therapist that I adore. She, like, I can walk into her space and feel like I have gone to a week of therapy. And so I see her monthly, and I take time to work in my garden, and I say no, which is really hard. And I cap myself with clients so that um, I'm not feeling that feeling again, because it was pretty rough.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you mentioned that it's okay to say no as well. And that's like a
Yeah,
practice, something you have to practice. I mean, people, no matter what their profession, if they have a profession, like they're stay at home mom or just a human being out in the world, like the ability to say no to something is,
yeah,
yeah. I hear Brene Brown in my head
yeah,
whenever I think about that. It's like this whole thing. They're like, if they
yeah,
someone asks you to do something before you instantly reply yes to it, you just like spin your ring around or like take a moment
yeah.
or even like make a boundary of where you're like, hey, let me get back to you on that. And
Hmm.
for me, I'm always like, yeah, I want to help you with this. I want to do that thing. I want to start a new project. I'll start a new stream. So I have to set
Yeah.
boundaries. I totally
Well, and you're like the
understand.
queen of projects. So it's like
Yeah.
seeing you doing all the things. I'm like, when does this girl sleep? Like,
Oh man.
it's it's
Yeah.
a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's especially when you're so passionate about what you do and when it doesn't feel like work, it's so simple and so easy to say, well, I've already got 6 clients this month. What's a seventh? What's an eighth? What's a ninth? You
Yeah.
know, and so you get into that point where you're just like, well, what it is you stretching yourself so thin that you can't be well in any of those spaces. You're stretching yourself too thin, or at least for me personally, like it gets to be too much. And so I just sort of from the beginning committed to not doing too much, which
Yeah.
is hard because I'm
No, I
kind of
love
a
that you
workaholic.
mentioned that. Yeah, I love that you mentioned where you're like, oh, I'm really passionate at my work because when you're doing what you love, they're like, oh, you never work a day in your life if you're doing what you love. That's not
Mhm.
true. You're
You
still
work
working.
all the
You
time is what you
probably work
do.
harder, even.
Yeah.
Especially if you're self employed, you're probably putting your heart and your soul into this business, into your clients, and then you have to come home and you have to
Yeah.
balance that with your home life. And that's a whole balancing act. Like I always joke that I don't, out of all the things I do, I don't juggle, not yet. And but I
Yeah.
can juggle a lot of different, things in that sphere. I can't do three ball, five ball, any of that. So, but there's like a whole thing. People, there's like challenges where you have to like certify if you can do Mills mess and all this. And I'm around people who do this. Like juggling is their forte, and I'm like, man, I don't need
Yeah.
another hobby.
Nope. Nope. No thanks. I'm good. I'm good.
um, Yes, I'm really glad that you said that. That there is a boundary for people who are in that profession where when you do what you love, that you have to set a boundary for yourself because if you're putting your all into it, like what are you giving other people? It's a whole filled cup thing. If you're pouring from an empty cup, like who really is winning?
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I do. And like I said, when it's something that you love, it's really hard to feel like you're taking from that, but it catches up to you somewhere. It
Mm,
might not be in the work aspect, it might be in your health, which was a big part for me. It might be in your marriage, which was also a big part for me. It might be in your family, which was also a big part. Like my world was falling apart, and
yeah.
like I had no control over it, but all I could do was kind of pump the brakes and stop where I was. And so I think that, like, I just don't ever want to go back to that point. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's okay to recalibrate. I think it's important, for people to check in and be like, "Hey, is this?" It's very Marie. Is it Marie Kondo? Yeah. Or like, is this still giving me joy?
Mhm.
And if not, do I
Yes,
need to
does it
like,
bring me joy?
yeah, do I need to switch things up? And another thing that we remind ourselves a lot is this is supposed to be for fun. Like I got into this because I'm passionate about it. I know about
Mhm.
birth work. It is fun for me. It is something that I'm passionate about. It makes my heart happy to help other people. But if there's
Right.
days where you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing this for, like that's a moment where
Yeah.
it might be time for some like recalibration, reevaluation.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and it's funny because I never got to that point with the work, you know?
Yeah,
It was just that everything else made it harder, you know? Everything else was harder. And
yeah,
so, I think that's part of why I kept going with midwifery, and I didn't stop there because I knew that that's where I was supposed to wind up and that's what I was supposed to be doing, but I needed to like go down a different road than I was.
Which is the perfect lead up to. First, I'd like to ask you, what is something totally unrelated to your profession that has influenced you? And then we'll
Yeah.
get to your midwifery journey.
So that one is hard too because I feel like everything, like even on my front, like the first page of my website, it says I've been preparing for all my life, and it's true. Like everything I've done has led me where I am, and so I was having such a hard time trying to pick something that I felt was influential in, you know, me being a midwife that wasn't related to midwifery. And I mean, the kind of only thing that I sort of felt like I could delineate was, I grew up in, pretty poor and like in some rough instances and like, abusive homes and swapped from home to home to home to home to home. And so I think it just kind of gave me like this incredible ability to adapt and always see the other side of the coin. Like there's always two sides to the story and that sort of thing. So that was kind of like I know it's like a character thing, but I was like, that's kind of a big thing, and I feel like to some level I bring that into my office every day when I'm dealing with clients and their sort of like home lives and stuff like that. It just gives me empathy with like, you know, it's
Yeah.
okay if you're struggling. Like that's a part of life. Like that's
Hmm.
not everything is perfect. So,
Yeah, no, that totally, totally counts for that question, because that's part of it's a unique experience that you have that you're bringing into your practice. And I think that's
mhm.
fantastic. That you brought that up. Um, and can we hear your midwifery origin story? Like, how did you come into the birth community? What was that journey for you?
Yeah. So it's a really long story, with lots of twists and turns. And so I kind of condense it down and basically say, um, in my previous marriage, I struggled with infertility and did the typical traditional, like, doctor OB, seeing fertility specialists, like medication kind of process. Eventually had my son, and I was 27, which for me I felt was like really old. All of my friends already had children that
Yeah.
were in school. Like I was one of the last, if not the last person of my friend group to have a child, and so I had expectations going into that about what I wanted to do and what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do that were completely ignored and sort of like made fun of and mocked. And I was not in a supportive situation with my former spouse where it was like I was on my own, like in
Yeah.
this fight. But at the end of the day, like I'd fought so hard for this child and he was here and it was fine because I can adapt. And so I moved along. He and I got divorced, and I just assumed I would never have kids again because I'm single now and I'm supposedly infertile, and here we are. But in that process of like going through a divorce, hitting my 30s, kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up, I knew that I wanted to do something healing, and I knew that I wanted to work with women. And I didn't know what capacity that was. So I actually started off, originally, I wanted to be a naturopathic doctor, but there's not a course way for that in Oklahoma. I would have had to leave the state. There were only 4 states that had like actual naturopathic medicine, like school where you would go through medical school and basically specialize in naturopathic medicine. And with a young child and shared custody, that wasn't a thing. And so then I turned to herbs. Um, and I stayed there for a while, but I also had several friends who were having like their second or third babies, and so I was talking to them about like holistic living and
Yeah.
healing through herbs and through food, and in the process, like I'd met my husband now, and sort of had switched my entire lifestyle, my entire way of thinking and eating, and I had my own struggle with like PCOS and endometriosis, and so I was like, I'm just going to science experiment myself. Like, let me try all these herbs and see what I can do. And I wound up like getting pregnant completely not on purpose, not
Mhm.
even trying. Didn't even know I was pregnant for like 2.5 months because I'm not supposed to
Yeah.
have babies. Um, and like my husband and I had two more children at like 35 and 37, and it was in that process of like all of that healing that I came in. Like I heard what a doula was. My husband's from England, and so when I got pregnant again, I was like, "There's no way I'm gonna go back to my like all of that like
Yeah.
trauma from that first birth came back." I was like, I can't do that. I can't like I don't know what to do. And so it was his suggestion actually that we try to find a midwife
Oh, how
because that's what
cool.
everyone in England does. And so that's the process that we went through. And so my last two kids were born at home, and I actually became a doula in that process. And my best friend, I can remember, like, even before I think I had attended my first doula birth, she sent me a text saying, "Are you sure you don't want to be a midwife? I feel like you need to be a midwife." And I was like, "No, I don't want that responsibility. Like, I just want to like empower people and like help them find their voice and let them know that they have autonomy over their body and like that they can do things and like that they're in charge of their situation, right?" And I mean, like I had attended like a handful of births, and I texted her. I was like, "Yeah, so about that midwife thing, I'm totally like I can't be a doula forever. This is
Yeah,
hurting my
yeah,
heart."
yeah.
Um, so that's kind of how it began, and it all sort of overlapped.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that story, especially like the beginning part too, where you know like the adversity that you went through in order to get to where you are today. Um, I relate to that hardcore. If I can use that as a relation, um, when I became a doula, I was in the middle of a divorce, and you know moved to a whole brand new state, and you know and things have gone fantastically well. I'm extremely lucky, but learning how, like finding how to be a birth worker or a wellness worker in this community, it's hard when you're the only parent, like you're a single parent. And I had two kiddos, you know, that's a whole thing, so you're trying to get on your feet as a parent, and you know just learn what that life is like and learn how to support your kids and be
Right.
there for them. And then on top of being a birth worker, like that's makes
Yeah.
me super appreciative of my husband, because oh my god, then I come
Yeah.
home from a really long birth and he has pancakes, like he feeds me some like amazing meal, and then he's like, okay, go sleep, I got the kids for
Yeah.
you. I'm like,
Yeah. I mean, I crawled into bed at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning after we had back to back to back births. And I came home and he's like, "All right, go to bed. I've got the boys." And he left the house for
yeah,
the
yeah,
day. So, yeah, I mean, my husband, like, he definitely does not get enough, like, acknowledgement, but like he's been the at-home parent the whole time
hmm,
and like has held it down. And like if I come home, there's food for me and
yeah,
I get to sleep. And it's nice to have that support.
yeah, yeah. Shout out and standing ovation for all the partners who are out
Exactly.
there supporting birth workers, because like I mean, like I said, there's not every birth worker has the partner in the picture, but you know, for
Yeah.
those who have that community and that support structure, like oh my gosh, you are invaluable. Like it's hard work, and you're just making it a
Mhm.
little bit easier by being there. But yes. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that with you. So, when it comes to
Yeah.
midwifery, what what do you feel makes you unique? And I ask this question because I feel like when I'm telling clients like, "Hey, here's, you know, these are midwives, or you know, there's other doulas too." You're
Yeah.
going to connect with these people differently. And that's why you see like I mean,
Yeah.
I know you know this, but for anyone watching, that's why you hear the recommendation of like go meet other doulas, go meet other midwives,
Mhm.
because everyone's unique, and I'm sure they're all like wonderfully certified and qualified, but it's like a very personal connection. So can you
Yeah.
let can you talk about what you feel makes you unique as a midwife?
I mean, I did also struggle with this question, I'm not gonna lie. Because I know and love the midwifery community that we have. I've worked with 99% of these women, and they're all like gorgeous, amazing,
Hmm.
like talented, like caring beings. And so I'm over here going like, "Hi guys.
Yeah.
I like herbs and I'll feed you some food.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's just I think it's just my personality. I just tend to be very easygoing, and I'm incredibly supportive of parent autonomy and supporting um, you know communities that maybe don't all feel like they have a community, like a place in the birth community, whether it's like, the families of color, or the families who aren't Christian, or the families who are, in the queer community, or whatever it is. Like, I feel like I offer like a pretty cozy spot for them to come and sit down and have a cup of
Yeah.
tea while we get to know each other. And they might not pick me, they might find a midwife that they like better, but um I'm just always happy to sort of like share the gospel of midwifery with anybody who wants to sit down and talk about it.
Yes, yes. I love that you have like I would have sit down and have tea with you, and the cozy aspect too. Like I love that because like my favorite parts of midwifery is when it's very like personable and
Yeah.
cozy. And yay for all of those who are making cozy spots for people who are struggling to
Hmm.
find them in the first
Yeah.
place. Um,
Well, I always joke that I feel like I'm the underdog advocate. Like, I've been like that since I was old enough to talk, right? If somebody was getting picked on, like, they're now my best friend. Or if
yeah,
there was like, you know what I mean? It was
yeah,
just
yeah.
that's been my personality. So I feel like sometimes I get those families who just kind of feel like there's not a place for me right now. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, now you have a place. Like, come
Yeah.
in, sit down, let's talk.
And it's like from Labyrinth, this the caterpillar. He's like, come inside, have a cup of tea, like
Yeah.
everyone's in there. Yeah, that's super cool. I'm so thankful that you have that cozy space, and that's what makes you unique. I mean, everybody is deserving of supportive care and midwifery care if that's the option they're
Absolutely.
choosing. So it's nice to have people
Absolutely.
who do different things. And I like that you also said that, like, hey, I mean, all these midwives and birth workers, like, we are very lucky to have so many fantastic professionals in our
Absolutely.
community, which is one reason I really wanted
Yeah.
to do this project because I really want to highlight, like, there are so many fantastic people. Let me
I
let me
know.
show you. Let me show you them. And like, if someone, I tell people that when when they come to my doula consultation, I'm like, hey, if I'm not your girl, if I'm not your doula, let me help you
Hmm.
find someone else. Because what's most important
Absolutely.
to me is that you feel that connection. Like you feel like it's kind of a weird metaphor, but when Harry Potter finds his wand, it's kind of like a
Yep.
lesser version of that. Like when you find
Like,
that person, yeah.
you just know. And I think that's the thing that's so great about it, is that like you just know, like, you click and and you have this like feeling of like, okay, I found my spot. This is going to feel good. And you might feel that way about multiple midwives. So you might
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
narrow down based off of like graphs and charts and some sort of like Excel spreadsheet or something. I don't know, but I don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But throw a dart at pictures, pick the one that like whose hair you like the most. I don't
Yeah.
know. But but I think, for some people it can be really challenging to find people that they click with, that where they don't feel judged, or they don't feel talked down to, and because that's the community that they've grown up in, or that's the
Yeah,
world that
yeah.
they've lived. I think that our community of midwives are extremely supportive and accepting of all people, um all of the time. So it's always just so special when somebody chooses you as a midwife,
Yeah.
because you know that they trust you, and that they think that there's something that connects you.
Yeah, it's like the biggest honor. I know I've been doula for 3 years, and every time someone is like, "You're our doula," like you're the person, and I'm like, "Thank you
I
so much." Like
know.
it's never gonna get old when someone.
Yeah.
Then when you get to
Yeah.
that room, that birth space, whether it be a hospital
Hmm.
room or like a home birth or a birth center, and you get there and you're like, how lucky am I to be invited
Yeah.
into this space? Like what I
Absolutely.
have goosebumps thinking about it because it's
Yeah.
just you work so hard to get there. I think that as a birth worker, one of the hardest parts is like finding clients and getting into the world and learning and certifying and all this. And then you get
Hmm.
there and you're like, I've arrived and here I am and they
Yeah.
chose me.
I know. It feels so good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And just the awe. Like there are days where I just sit in awe of the things that we're like so privileged to be able to see and support. And like
Mm.
I adore every person whose birth I've ever attended, whether they were my personal client, whether I was there as like a supportive midwife or as a student or whatever. Like I can go back to almost every single one of those births and just like know that moment where I'm just like, oh, this is such a special place to be, you know?
Yeah.
And it's yeah, there are days where I get overwhelmed with like the joy of it all.
Yeah, and that's a perfect. What is one of your favorite? And this is probably hard, but what is one of your favorite memories when it comes to your work as a midwife?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many. Like I remember the first home birth that I ever went to, which this will absolutely go down as one of my favorite like birth memories ever. I got to go to, I was the doula for this like amazing woman who I just like, she was the coolest thing since like sliced bread.
Yeah.
And I was so like jazzed that she thought that I was cool enough to be in her space. And she was having a home birth, and her midwife was Elizabeth Norwood, she's like my ride or die. I love her on words. And Kristen Grauer, who is, she and I work together all the time. She was the midwife at the time. And this mom was rock and rolling, and I get there first. And it's one of those panic moments when you're the doula at a home birth and you're just like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, am I going to have to deliver this baby? Oh my gosh, they're not here yet. They're on their way, they're on their way, but she's moving fast. Anyway, so we have a beautiful birth. Everything's amazing. And this woman has like stocked her entire pantry and fridge with like every delectable delight you could
Oh
ever
my
imagine.
gosh.
And we wound up having blueberry pie at 4 a.m. And I got to sit with these two beautiful women and talk about birth at a home birth. Like it was
Yeah.
like I already knew I was going to be a midwife. It was my first birth back from maternity leave with my youngest, who's now 7, and so he was like 4 months old at the time. And I just like it was just like, yep,
Yeah.
this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be. Like that's one of my very very favorite moments ever. One of my most memorable moments, like with a birth, I was a student, and this client, she was having kind of a hard transition,
Yeah.
and next thing I know, like she's holding my arm and she's singing as she's like trying to push her baby out, and I almost lost it. Like I was like, you gotta stop.
Yeah.
As she's like mustering, the courage and calling on her mom who had passed to like help her bring this baby
Oh
into the
no.
world. Like, oh, I still get goosebumps. Oh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there are so many. I mean, recently I got to attend the birth as a midwife, and this has happened a couple of times. I've gotten to attend birth as a midwife who I was the doula for, like in the
Oh yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
And like I'm just like, I gotta go with the corner and cry now. And they're like, Deanna, like calm down. Calm down.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been nice. Yeah.
I feel
Lots of great things.
I feel it's really interesting that a lot of midwives have positive memories around food when it food and birth.
Uh, Food is my love language.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to show you how much I love you by what I put on your plate. And also, I'm always going to have snacks. And also, we're going to get food after we have a birth.
Yes. I know. I went to a birth earlier in the year with Deanna, and afterwards, they're like, "Do you want to go get food after?" I was like, "Yes, yes, I do. Yes, I do want to go
Mhm.
get it." And I was so hungry. I mean, it wasn't
I
that
was too.
long of a birth, honestly, but still, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is fantastic! I get to go hang out with these other birth workers." And also a cool
Mhm.
moment when like your client chooses you and you have the privilege of being in their space, and then the other birth worker's like, "Hey, do you want to come eat with us?" You're like, yeah. You want to come eat with me?
Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt over blueberry pie. We're sitting
Yeah,
there, and
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I'm with the big girls.
Exactly, exactly. It feels like that. You're like, oh my gosh. And one of my
Yeah.
favorite memories is my own home birth where my kids were like, we're hungry, and I'm giving birth in the water birth and our little birth pool, and the birth photographer Stephanie, who was on our first nurture series, she and one of our midwives made pizza for my children. And so there's this whole joke about
So
how they
good.
were delivering a pizza, not
Yep.
delivering a baby.
Yeah. Hey, after my first home birth, my midwife stood there and spoon fed me scrambled eggs because she was like, "You need
Oh,
some
yeah.
food."
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to nurse the baby, and she's like feeding me scrambled eggs while I'm
Yes.
standing there. So
I got
it's
you.
like it was a sweet, yeah, it was a sweet memory. And so that's something that I'm always like cognizant of. Like when clients have their babies, I'm like, "All right, what can I get you to eat? Do you want me to make you a
Yeah.
sandwich? I can make you like I can heat you something up. I'll scramble you some eggs. I'll stand here and feed you." Like
Yeah.
because that's what you do, that you're there to take care of them, and that's just part of it. Yeah.
It is a fantastic experience after like my first two births were in the hospital and then my last baby was at home and like you have your baby, they tuck you into bed, your midwives do, and then bring you a platter of food and like
Mm-hmm.
give you water and they're like, here, make sure, and doing all these
Yeah.
things and you're just like, this is so great. This you don't have like nurses coming in like, hey, time to here to squish your tummy. I mean, you get to squish tummy
Yeah.
yourself. But that's not the very
Yeah.
anatomical term. It's squishing your uterus. But
Yeah.
yeah, mom talk like squish your tummy.
I'm gonna squish your tummy.
Um,
It's fine.
it's okay. So we're already like technically at time, but I have more questions for you. Is that okay if I ask you
I'm
more
cool if
questions?
you're cool.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I'm cool if you're cool.
So there is one thing I wanted. So there has been some updates about midwifery in Oklahoma, and I was wondering if you
Mhm.
could enlighten anyone who might watch this about what those updates are, considering like licensure and things.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, technically, as of today, any midwife who is a certified professional midwife or a certified midwife in the state of Oklahoma should be licensed by the state. And I believe that almost every midwife in the state has accomplished that. I think there were a couple that didn't get done at the last cutoff, but there's another meeting being done in a couple of weeks, and so
Okay.
I'm confident that they'll get approved then as well. But yeah, so there's a lot of new processes that we have to go through that are state required, just to make sure that the clients fully understand like our scope of practice, what it is that we can and can't do, and that we now by law have to abide by these regulations. And a lot of midwives were we always sort of talked about how we were self-regulated before which is a great, like we've had great outcomes, most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, and everybody is like super supportive, and we do peer review and try to meet those national standards. But now it's just kind of on paper with the state legislation that like, hey, these midwives are now recognized by the state, they're governed by the state, and these are kind of our guidelines. And so at the first visit with me with a new client, we sit and go over everything. It takes a minute to go
Yeah.
to go over. So we go over like what could preclude them from care, what could risk them out of care, the formulary that that we have, like what kind of medications can we legally carry, how can we use them. There's talk about like we have to disclose whether we have malpractice insurance or not, and like historically malpractice insurance is not something that's easily attained by a certified professional midwife. I'm not sure about a certified midwife because I'm not as familiar with that, but they would not cover somebody who was in an unregulated state, which Oklahoma had been until recently.
Oh, okay.
So it would be very unlikely that a certified professional midwife who was licensed by the state would have malpractice insurance at this time. And then we have we have multiple like things that we do as far as like preparing for transfer, like an emergency transfer. We fill that out at the first visit, like where would your preferred hospital be, where's your emergency hospital, how far are you. We do informed consents for specific like special births, like if we're doing a VBAC at home or a planned breech birth or planned twins at home, like those have their own special informed consent that we go over. So there's just a lot of new paperwork, and quite frankly, like the midwives are doing a great job at, keeping on top of it, but it's a new process. And so, there's stumbling blocks, and we're obviously like doing our best to explain it to people in a way that it's user friendly and that it's understandable, but it's also new to us. And so we're trying to make sure that we're doing right by ourselves and our clients. And it can definitely be a little bit of a challenge. I
Yeah.
actually give my clients like a packet, a packet of paper, like all of that stuff is printed off. And so, cause I'm a visual person.
Mhm.
So I email them an email with all of the links, like to the department or the Oklahoma Health Department website where they can find it all online. And then I also print it off and hand it to them. So I'm like, I'm covering if you're
Yeah.
visual or if you're
All the bases.
technical, like
Yeah.
I got you.
So,
So
what's
yeah,
the
it's all
difference
awesome.
between someone who is licensed with the state and someone who chooses to not license with the state? Can someone who's not licensed still practice, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it doesn't preclude people who are not licensed from practicing. Like their practice might look a little bit different, in that like they don't have access to medications in the same way that I would. And that's not to say that their clients couldn't potentially obtain them in another manner, through their PCP or something like that. But it's like legally I can purchase and carry and administer the medications that the state has like given us permission to
Okay.
have, right? So that's a factor for some people, like just basically carrying oxygen, is now something that's not a felony in the state anymore.
Nice.
So
That's a
um,
fantastic thing.
I know it's a good thing. It's a good thing. We're so appreciative. So yeah, they, I would imagine that any midwife that was choosing to stay unlicensed is going to, continue to inform her clients the way that they always have of their scope of practice and their education and what their limitations and are, just like we do. So it would boil down to personal preference, I think, for that family of whether or not they wanted to go one route or the other. But there's no right or wrong answer. It's just kind of like before with like picking your midwife, it's just a part of the
Yeah.
process.
Awesome. And so can people still have a home birth with a midwife if they have breech or twin babies? And you kind of touched on that earlier. Is something that's not allowed to do, or can you do at home birth with that?
Yeah, so there are limitations on that, but they are overall al- allowed. I say allowed, and I use that word loosely, but yes, they are all
Yeah.
overall allowed. So with a breech baby, if you were planning a breech birth, so this would be you had a baby that was persistently breech, you knew this at 36, 37, 38 weeks, and you're like, you know what, I feel confident having a breech baby at home. I want to consent to this, and so we would go over the risks and benefits, and probably get another ultrasound to confirm presentation. The baby would need to be in a frank or a complete breech position. It couldn't be footling or incomplete breech.
Mm.
And so that's kind of the caveat there. Um, I know personally, I don't plan breech births at home with a first time parent. It would have to be somebody who had had a vaginal birth before. So that's just my own like personal
Yeah, yeah.
like sort of like stipulation. But yeah, so that would be the parameters there. With twins, it's a little bit more complicated, and those that informed consent's actually still kind of being wrapped up. But from what I know of like attending the meetings, it's going to any kind of twins that are not die, meaning they have their own placenta, their own amniotic sac, would be excluded. And then even within the die, the babies would have to, like baby A would have to be head down, and there would have to be no like size discrepancies between the babies. Like they would have to be fairly similar in size.
So it sounds like it's a little more difficult to have a twin birth at home then. There's a little
Yeah,
more.
and it always has been more difficult to have a twin
Mhm.
birth at home. Any I've attended a couple of twin births throughout my training at home, and it's very rare that it's done because number one, you have to get to 37 weeks, which is challenging in and of itself when you have a twin birth or twin pregnancy, and then you are making sure that baby A is head down most of the time, and that all these other things are okay. And it is just a higher risk pregnancy just from the start, and so making sure that all of your T's are crossed and I's are dotted is really important. And so yeah, I mean, it's not that it's impossible, and it wasn't impossible prior. Midwives that had breech and twin experience were still doing that, but it was still challenging to get to
Yeah.
that end goal of having your baby at home. So it's not any different. It's just laid out in a document that the state has provided for us, and we consent with our clients over. So
Okay, thank you so much for explaining that. I know there's been so much going on. I remember when I first moved to Oklahoma, I went to like a walk that was like support midwifery in
mhm.
Oklahoma, and now all the way to now where there's licensure now. So it's
um,
a whole lot of stuff that's been going on recently.
yeah.
So, and so I'll steal you for two more questions, I think. I'm like, oh, it's so hard to pick. Okay, so what is the biggest challenge you have with your specific role right now, and how are you working to overcome that challenge?
Uh, um, yeah. I would say time management is still a challenge for me as far as like, I touched on it earlier, kind of being a workaholic. And so like I'll see my clients all day and then I'll go, I might stay here and do a little bit of paperwork and then I'll go home and then I'll have like a fax come through or a text come through or a call or like, and so like finding a time to kind of shut it off if it's not urgent can be really challenging for me. And so this is probably the biggest thing that I'm still learning. But I am trying to take time every day after the end of my clinic day to set and like, okay, what do I really need to get done right this minute? What do I want? Like, and so I just constantly have like a list of things that I need to get done going, right? And so I'm crossing them
Yeah,
off and I'm adding to it. Just like important, got to get at some point, forget about these either. Like, so yeah, that's my big thing right now.
yeah. It's funny that you said that because I almost do the same thing every day. I learned a skill called brain dumping. So instead of just like
Mhm.
anxiously trying to manage my life like a sim, I think of myself. I played a lot of Sims. A lot, probably a shameful amount of Sims. So now, like, I think when I'm doing things throughout the day, I'm like organizing them on my cube on top of my screen,
Mhm.
like in but
That's funny.
and you have like kids and businesses and pets and like I have a mini farm that gets harder to do in so many different
Yeah.
projects. So I learned how to brain dump, and I have this rocket book, which is this really cool notebook where you can just like wipe things off. It's wipeable
Mhm.
paper and pens and stuff. But in the morning, my husband and I, we do like tarot coffee and brain dump, and we just sit and
Mhm.
like everything you could possibly think of that you want to do that day, you just dump on this paper. It doesn't matter like how many pages you need, just put it out there and
Yeah.
then pick three things that you want to
Yeah.
get done for sure that day. If you do more, then like that's great, but three things, and
Yeah.
that has been really helpful. So I'm so glad you brought that up because that's something that's really been helpful for me personally is being able to sort of write all the things down, and then it feels so good when you
Mhm.
get to go back and be like, like
Yeah.
did
Yeah, for
it.
sure. For sure. And that's why I write it down. And this is something that I learned, a million moons ago in college. It was just basically like your top 6 things of the day. And then whatever you didn't complete went on to the top of your next list for the next day. And like my list is definitely not limited to 6, like it's the whole page.
Yeah, yeah,
But especially with like licensure, like I'm updating all of my forms and making sure everything is like within the regulations and everything like that. So I feel like I've got so much kind of paperwork that I'm just kind of constantly trudging away at. But then if there's something urgent that a client needs, like of course that's coming to the forefront. And so it's sort of like organized chaos, like just like juggling all the things. And it's
yeah.
like, oh nope, this one's more important now. I gotta put this at the top. So
Yeah, yeah. Or just like as a parent, you're probably familiar with like you go to put the laundry away and then you realize that the floor is dirty, so then you vacuum and then you realize while you're vacuuming that like you forgot to feed the dog, and
Mhm.
then when you forgot to just like this crazy stack of things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so bad at that. Getting there, we're getting there. This is part of the thing. Okay, so
It totally is. Yeah.
it's gonna be so hard to pick a last question. It's been so much fun having you on the stream. Let's see. um, I mean, I think you have a really fantastic. I think that this one would be really cool. Who are three influential people that have influenced you and your midwifery practice?
So yeah, I'm like not good at sticking to threes, but obviously my husband like came in to the play, so like he was sort of like a catalyst. But I mentioned Elizabeth Norwood earlier and kind of said how she was my ride or die. She was one of my acceptors. I trained with her longest and was in
Mm-hmm.
the trenches with her, like left, right, and center. And so um, I always like there's nobody like if I had to choose one person to do births with, like definitely she's the person I'd want to have by my side. But she now works in Tulsa, and so we don't get to do births together very often. But she is amazing and like super knowledgeable. She's just like a walking encyclopedia of births, and so she taught me a lot. And we have very, very, very different personalities, but it was like Oreos and milk. Like we just
That's so cute.
it was great.
Yeah.
Um, it was great. And then, like probably the second person, I mentioned Kristen earlier as well. Kristen Grauer, she's another midwife here in the Oklahoma City area, and she graduated just as I was kind of coming into doing primary births as a student, and we sort of like felt like sisters, because we were raised by the same midwives, and we attend primarily all of our births together. Like
Yeah.
we always have two midwives at every birth, um and then also an assistant. And so she just I've learned so much about like just sitting and being from her at birth, and just that sort of nurturing, quiet,
Yeah.
like holding space. Like that's just she's just so and so I've just learned so much from her as far as just letting it be. And so that's been really nice because a lot of times we know so much that sometimes we just want to do something, and not always, but sometimes doing nothing is the something that needs to be done.
Yeah. Ooh,
um
I had to quote that. I need to yeah, sorry,
um
continue.
yeah, so I will say that my last one is a tie because it's two retired midwives. And when I was pregnant with my 9-year-old, I sat in my robe,
Mm-hmm.
very pregnant, in my red robe, drinking tea all day and reading Peggy Vincent's book called Baby Catcher, and sobbed through most of it because I was pregnant and very emotional. And that was the book that I knew, like, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And there's like, if you haven't read the book, it's amazing.
I'm like,
It's up in
mm.
it is a wild and hairy ride. Like I'm not even gonna lie. Like people kind of look at me and like, really, you read that book and then you still wanted to be a midwife? Because there was a lot of like, she was a midwife in like the 60s and the 70s in Berkeley, and so there was a lot of transition that happened during her book. So anyway, I won't give it away, but super amazing person. I'm friends with her on Facebook. She shares
Ooh,
recipes. Like
yeah.
she she's good. And then, but the one that kind of taught me like the kind of midwife that I wanted to be was Carol Leonard. And Carol's book is called Lady's Hand, Lion's Heart. I can never say it properly. It's a memoir, of course, about her time as being like essentially the first midwife in her state. She was trained by a doc that used to go and deliver babies at home, and he needed help because he wanted to retire. And so he taught her everything that she needed to know. And then like she was one of the founding people of MANA, which is a big midwifery organization. And so she's a badass. Like
Oh,
even
that's
still,
amazing.
so I'm friends with her on Facebook as well. And
Yeah.
she's like your crazy aunt that you're freaking amazing. And I can't believe you said that, but can I please sit next to you? Because I don't,
At holidays, I
she's
want to be
so good.
right next to you. Like we're gonna be.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
I hope I
It's
am
like,
that
what is
aunt.
that line? It's that line from Still Magnolias, about if you don't have anything nice to say about anybody, come sit next to me. It's kind of like that. She's a lovely person. I don't want to paint it off like she's like a gossip or anything, but she's just sharp and like witty and just she cracks me up. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to add those books to my collection. I have, and we can see if I have like all these baby books over here. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting there. Thank you so much for your answer, and thank you so much for joining this project. It really means a lot to me that you and other birth
Yeah.
workers have come and made time, especially time is hard to come by when you're a birth worker.
Yeah,
So
for
I really
sure.
appreciate you. Can you tell everyone who might watch this or is currently watching this how they can connect with you and learn more about you?
Sure. Yeah, I have a website. Holistic Birthing Services is my website, and then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook under Holistic Birthing Services as well. And that's kind of really the only places. Like, I'm not a big social media person. I post some stuff on there, but I'm kind of like, here's my website,
Yeah.
here's my phone number.
And it's a
Call
gorgeous
me.
website, so it's very nice.
Thank you. I like it.
I like nerd out. I go and check out everybody's websites, and I'm like, ooh, that's nice. Like, ooh, girl,
Yeah,
this looks good.
yeah. Every so often I go and I tweak it a little bit. It's
Yeah,
really, yeah, it's been a labor of love.
it's a work in progress. You have to
Yeah.
do the thing. You have to update your website, so that's the whole thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, thank you so much for making time, and thank you for everyone who watched and watches this in the future. Um, Next week we will have doula Juliet Henson on, and a fantastic doula that I'm super excited to have on of Empowered Lotus Doula Services. So we'll be here same time next week. Let's do that. I have to do my love that for you, David. Hands. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Good night.
You're welcome.